Hi, Richa. How are you?
Very good, Tracy. Lovely seeing you. How are you?
I am great. I'm really excited to be doing this. As you know, we're here to chat about mentoring moments, and we're going to talk about some of the key things that we notice as mentors and evaluators that are opportunities for development for coaches.
Yeah, I'm excited.
I am too. I'd love for you to introduce yourself and just tell us maybe a couple things about yourself and also what you love about coaching.
Oh my God, I could go on for hours, but I promise I'll be crisp. Okay, so I am Richa Chadha, founder and CEO of Coachampion. I This is my venture where I practice coaching. I call myself a leverage coach. So I am an MBA with 10 plus years of experience in the corporate and an MS in organizational psychology. I am a PCC and ACTC credentialed coach by the ICF and a mentor coach with Coacharya. Now, the passion that brings me into coaching is to empower people and to make workplaces better. So we can talk so much about it, but I'll stop here.
I am Tracy and I am an ICF certified PCC coach. I'm also a certified meditation and mindfulness teacher. I am a mentor and a facilitator with Coacharya as well. What makes me the most passionate about coaching? Honestly, I think, like you said, it would go on, but I really do see it as something that it can be in and is an incredible career, but it's also a way of being that will benefit anyone that goes through the process of learning to be a coach in every aspect of their life, no matter what they're doing for work, no matter who they're interacting with. It's just a way of connecting with people. And in a world that needs more connection, we need more coaches.
I love it.
So that's also why I'm excited to be here with you today and to chat about things that we commonly see in our roles with Coach Arya as opportunities for coaches to further develop the way that they're coaching. And before we get started, I thought we could also maybe just chat very quickly about when we were learners and going through this whole process, what we each found the most challenging.
Hmm. Okay, so there are a couple of things that are on the top of my mind. First is, and I think we are going to discuss about it, is getting comfortable with competency three. Like, how do I chat about the goal? And then once I have the goal, should I just dive into it or should I just ask about the measures of success? What points should each come in? So a lot of those questions around competency three, but I think that, as my coaching journey evolved, I got comfortable and then now it comes automatically. And the second thing, which is a little more nuanced, is so sometimes when the clients keep speaking for, say, 10 minutes, I'm like, okay, this seems important. This seems important. This seems important as well. Well, I've forgotten the first one now. How do I remember what's important for the client? And I remember bringing this up in one of my mentoring calls with Ram, and how beautifully he explained to me. I think after that, I've not had that doubt anymore. And he said that, Richa, you don't have to remember. All you have to remember is just be there in your like the best listening way, best listening form that you can be, like practice generative listening. And even if you feel that there are two, three things and you may be missing one, if it's important for the client will bring it up. You do not have to remember. So like if I'm trying to remember, basically I'm not hearing what the client is saying, I'm not listening if I'm trying to like make mental notes. So I think that transformed me as a coach. So these two, I think I would say. What about you, Tracy?
Was relating to everything that you just shared. And Ram also mentored me. And one of the things he told me or invited me to do was let go of the outcome. So when I am sitting there trying to remember everything the client says, it's very performative. And so then I'm making it about me and not them. So I can very much relate to that. And I can also relate to what you shared about competency three. That was the bane of my existence for a very long time. I really had to learn how to become friends with each marker, really sit with what is the meaning behind the marker? What is it that they want? Like, what's the intention here? And
Mm,
that really helped. And it was really interesting because one of the things that I found out about myself in terms of why I was struggling with creating agreement, partnering to create agreement in a session, is that I was really struggling with asking people to be a little more clear when there wasn't clarity. And I mean,
mm,
of course, we don't say it that way. Can you be a little more clear? But we just continue partnering with the client to have that clarity, to have what the ICF calls a shared vision. And what was really interesting about that is that discovering that about myself in coaching, I actually realized that that is something that I struggle with just in life in general. When I was having other communications with people and they weren't being clear, I was hesitant to ask them clarifying questions. And so it was really helpful for me to resolve that part in coaching because then it also helped me resolve that in my day-to-day life.
that's so powerful. Like as you said before, when you learn to be a coach, so not only are you transforming and empowering others, supporting them in their journeys, it transforms you as well. I'm a much better listener and much more empathetic than I was ever before.
I know that one of the things that we're going to talk about today is actually around agreement. One of the things that I wanted to quickly share before we do that is that one of the other areas that I really struggled with as a learner coach was around receiving feedback.
Mhm.
And I found that I was very sensitive. I can still be very sensitive. And so I saw it as a comment on my performance and that, hurt my pride a little bit. And I really can't ex- say it any other way. That was what was happening. And that also really helped to realize that it's an opportunity for development. And the reason that I'm sharing that now before we get started is that everything that we're talking about is a learning opportunity. So if you are watching this and you meet with your mentor and your mentor outlines some areas that are opportunities for development, just really want to invite you to consider how seeing that is kind of like looking in the mirror and actually realizing that there's something you weren't aware of and that you can attend to will be so helpful to you, not just in coaching, but in other areas of your life. So when we say opportunity for development, it's not a nicely phrased way of saying, oh, you made a mistake in your coaching session. That's not it at all. You are learning a new way of being. And that learning is going to have some twists and turns and roadblocks. And so we're just presenting common things that we're seeing, common things that we've experienced even as coaches, and giving you the opportunity to reflect on it and perhaps approach it a little bit differently.
Very well said, Tracy. In fact, I just want to add one more sentence to what you said, and it is that we are all works in progress. So nobody can say that I am here and this is the kind of coach that I wanted to be. We are all learning from each coaching session that we have, either with the same client or with another. So let's just be there for each other and support our learnings together.
So, Rich, I know that you wanted to share some thoughts around the session measure of success. And before we get into that, I thought maybe we could just really quickly talk about the difference between 3.1 and 3.2. 3.1 is about what the client wants what their focus topic or goal is for the session. So generally, a coach will broach that conversation a few minutes into the session. Maybe they've talked a little bit with the client, asked them some questions about what's happened in between session, all of those things, how they're feeling right now. And then at some point, the coach is going to ask, what is it that you want to talk about today in our session together? And the client will share something. And so, for the purpose of our conversation today, let's say the client shares the fact that they need to have a difficult conversation with their boss.
Mhm. That's a pretty common one.
Right? Difficult conversations in general, and especially in the workplace.
We've all been there.
Yes. Yeah, I wish I had a coach at that point in time talking about that. So that's what they want to use the session is to explore. They want to have a conversation with their coach about how to approach a conversation that they're going to have later with their boss. Great. We know what the topic is, but we need to actually have more clarity on what the client wants from their time with the coach towards that bigger topic.
Yeah. Yeah, so what I've felt here, Tracy, and I've seen it happen a number of times, is like, the goal is pretty nuanced, right? The client's like, I want to have that conversation with my boss, and that's what I would want to work with my coach. So people will be like, okay, how would you know if you've achieved that goal? And the client will be like, when I feel more confident, when I face my boss, and the coach starts the conversation. More often than not, they'll be like, okay, so what do you feel when you, when you're facing your boss, or when you're approaching any conversation and something like that. And at this point, I usually I usually mentor people to, like, make the difference pretty clear in their heads, that this measure of success, is outside of the coaching session. Like, when they'll see their boss, they'll feel that confidence, and that's when they'll know. But here we need to be in this, beautiful container of the coaching session. Like, a simple question like, what would tell us that you feel confidence, that you feel confident at the end of the session? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I have seen that happen. And I'm even going to back it up a little because I think sometimes the reason that it happens is because the language the coach uses when they
Yeah.
ask the question to begin with. So the client comes into the session and they say that they want to talk about a conversation that they need to have with their boss. And it's something that they want to explore in the session. And so what the coach needs to do is, okay, the coach now understands the topic of the session, but the coach needs to know the measure of success for the session, which is basically going to tell the coach and the client that that's been sufficiently explored. And but what will happen is the coach is thinking about it and they're thinking in terms of measure of success, and they use those words with the client.
Yeah.
So they say to the client, okay, you want to talk about this conversation that you need to have with your boss. What will be your measure of success for that? Well, the client, unless they're a coach, isn't going to know what that means.
Yeah.
And so then what do you find happens in that case, Richa?
Yeah, so exactly, like, we discussed before, they'll be like, oh, when this happens for me, that will be a measure of success. Like, isn't that clear? Duh.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I think we need to speak the language people generally speak, rather than saying, what's the goal? What's the measure of success? And then, using all the marker language. So that's one thing I dissuade people from doing, is using the marker language. So use the words your client uses, and that will make the questions and you more relatable to them, rather than a subject matter expert.
Yeah, I love what you said about using the language that the client uses. And I think even just trying to, like what I mentioned I had to do for myself was to sit with each marker and understand the reason behind it, right? So even if a coach is able to kind of look at that marker language and simplify it for themselves and understand, okay, what is it that this is looking for?
Is the intention behind that marker, right?
Exactly. And so the intention really is that we need to know how that the session has been used the way that the client wants to use it towards whatever their larger goal is. There can be various things that that would be, right? It could be something very tangible, like the client says, I want to leave this session with a plan. I want to have, a
Some action
strategy that I'm going to put
steps.
into place.
Yeah.
Exactly. I want to have like I've seen clients that have said like I want to have a full page of notes, or I want to have some action steps,
Yeah.
or they'll say I want to have a feeling, like you brought up confidence. So the client
Confidence, yes.
I want to feel confident. Well,
And then
amazing.
that needs exploration, right? Like,
Exactly.
what would tell us that you're starting to feel confident, right? Or that we've reached that level, like, that needs to be there for the client and the coach to walk away from the session feeling that we've accomplished what we came to accomplish in the session.
Yeah, absolutely. So then the if the coach then asks the client, well, will tell us that you feel confident by the end of our time together today, then that's going to be really clear to the client, as opposed to them still thinking we're talking about when they walk in to have the conversation. Oh, I'll know because I'm standing up straight and I'm feeling really good as I'm, having this conversation. That's amazing. What will tell us now that you're feeling confidence by the end of our time together?
There's
Yeah.
one more thing that I want to add here, Tracy, which is sometimes I see coaches throwing their own languages on the client, like, oh, you want confidence. Okay. So what will give you more clarity? So then clarity, it's a big word. So we do not want to pile on like we do not want to increase the cognitive load on the client. We explore what they say and we try to use their words rather than throwing our big words. Oh, you want confidence, or introducing another word like clarity, or say, oh, you want action steps, whereas the client has never mentioned about the action steps. All they said is that we want confidence, right? So then just explore what will tell us that you've got confidence rather than saying, oh, do you want action steps for confidence? So I think I just wanted to add that.
Absolutely. I've seen that happen a lot where the client will state a bigger topic, and then the coach, as their measure of success question, will say, what will tell us that you have clarity about that by the end of the session? But the client has never said they wanted clarity. That's never once come in.
That's the coach's
So
word.
those are the coach's words. Yeah.
Yeah,
And then in that way, where the coach is unintentionally influencing the client.
yeah, yeah. It becomes more coach centric than client centric at that point of time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I also wanted to tie this to competency 8, Tracy, if that's okay to move on. In competency 8, it says that we celebrate and acknowledge the client, right? So what I've seen happen, like tying it back to competency 3, is that people will like, how will you celebrate when you have that difficult conversation with your boss? So that's again a celebration or something which is outside of the session. Whereas what needs to be acknowledged or celebrated here is the journey that the client has taken with you in those last 40, 50 minutes that you've spent together. And many a times they would ask the client, how will you like to acknowledge yourself, without even having acknowledged them. So we acknowledge them as coaches, like, and it doesn't need to be a full paragraph. It just needs to be one or two small sentences. That's it. And then you say, how would you like to acknowledge yourself? Or how would you like to celebrate the journey that you've taken? Like, you came in from here and then you wanted to go here, whatever that is that they are exploring, and you celebrate that with your client rather than saying that, oh, when you get that promotion, when you have that difficult conversation, and the client is not in that space. So I don't know where that comes from. So that's another thing that I wanted to point out, that I've seen a lot happen in coaching sessions.
Yeah. I've also seen that what'll happen is that the coach will also acknowledge the client for something about themselves at the end of the session. Like, oh, I really want to acknowledge the fact that you're so reflective.
Mm.
And, thank you for sharing with me. Lovely. That's still very different from acknowledging or celebrating their progress. So, what
Mm.
we really want to do is have that client feel empowered and recognize that they have shifted, that we've witnessed the shift in them, and that we're acknowledging for that them for that, and hopefully inviting them to also acknowledge themselves for that, which can support client autonomy. The other thing that I've seen happening is that, and I totally empathize. I've been there as the coach where we're so
Yeah.
close to the end of the session and we're like, I got it. I think this is going to be under 45 minutes. I can submit it. And so, you ask the client, what is it that you want to acknowledge yourself for? And the client says what they want to acknowledge themselves for. And the coach says, okay, great. Thanks. Is this a good time to end the session? Without ever acknowledging the client, or worse, sometimes the client will even thank the coach for everything they've done. And, the coach will say, you're welcome. And can we end the session? So just really remembering that it is a partnership,
Mhm.
and we don't want that partnership to be lopsided by the fact that we've asked the client to reflect on their progress and share it. And then we're not also participating in that celebration.
Yeah, partnering to close the session. That is again, I think And as you rightly mentioned, Tracy, we've all been there. So we've all learned it. And then, when we are mentoring, it feels quite familiar. So partnering to close the session is something where we partner with the client till the last moment, till the last sentence that we speak, which is like, how would you like to close the session? And more often than not, the answer will still be the same, but at least you're not asking like, okay, are we good to close the session? So yeah, and that feels pretty abrupt to me at times. That's like the perfect segue into something that we were discussing before, like, when coaches are exploring emotions. That's pretty important. And we were discussing how nonverbal cues could be explored, emotions could be explored. And I just want to hear from you, Tracy, like, what are your thoughts when you see coaching conversations and you mentor coaches on them?
Yes. Well, you're right. This is the perfect segue into it because we were talking about partnering.
Yeah.
And I think that what can happen sometimes is that a coach goes into a session and they're aware that they want to hold space for the who of the client. They want to be able to explore the client's feelings and emotions. However, they're missing an opportunity to fully partner with the client to actually explore using what's coming up for the client. And instead, what can happen is that we see a coach often just asking, how are you feeling about this? How do you feel about this? What's your energy like? What do you want your energy to be like? And
And
these,
sometimes it happens when the client has already said that I feel frustrated.
yes, exactly. I feel frustrated. How are you feeling about that?
How's
So,
your energy when you feel frustrated?
yeah, yes. So, you want to take it from there and just talk about how we can explore emotions and energy in a partnered way.
Yeah. So, like, emotions, energy, and all of this, I feel when the coach is 100% present, when they're not thinking about the next question or when they're not thinking about how they are performing as a coach, I think it happens automatically. So, like, Tracy, you and I are having a conversation, and if I feel suddenly that your eyes brighten up and they sparkle, and you talk about, like, when you were talking about your passion for coaching, I could sense that. So, as a coach, I would point that and tell, like, Tracy, I just want to share an observation and please let me know how it resonates with you. While you were sharing about coaching, I saw your eyes sparkle. What was that about? So you share an observation, s- you witness a nonverbal cue, like, sometimes when they'll talk about a difficult conversation with the boss, they'll droop down, and then, the coach observes. When the client is in the moment and they're talking, they do not realize all of this happening. But you as a coach are there to see me, to observe me, to listen to me, and you're observing all of those things. So sometimes, like, the aha moments that we so often run after, they happen when the coach shares these things, like, I observed this happened. And the client says, wow, I didn't realize that every time I talk about my boss, my body language droops. Seems like it's not my calling. Seems like I'm in the wrong place. And there you go. They're like preparing for another job or whatever. So I'm saying that this is how you partner. You share, you observe, you share, and then you follow it on with an exploratory question. You do not just throw it on the client like, I saw this happened. Rather, you partner with them and ask, like, what was going on? And please let me know if I'm wrong, but this is what I observed. So yeah, your thoughts, Tracy?
Wow, I have so many of them, but I'll try to contain them and express them clearly. What's really coming up for me is something that I think has been a bit of a pattern throughout this conversation, and it's something that is so natural. And that's that coaches feel under pressure to be able to evidence the competencies within their
Yeah.
conversation. And so then what happens is the coach's presence becomes competency centric instead of client centric.
Mhm.
And so absolutely when you're thinking about what you need to ask next, then you're missing the opportunities that are there by just observing what the client's sharing. It's the same if a coach is like furiously trying to take notes. They're over here and the client is giving so much information just through the way that they are expressing themselves non-verbally.
Mhm.
And So what happens is then the presence really becomes limited because the presence becomes about trying to go through almost like a checklist
Mm.
of I need to make sure I ask this, I need to make sure I ask that. And unfortunately, the opposite happens. So maybe the coach is going into it thinking, I really need to, and I've had coaches share this with me, and I felt this myself, you know, I really want to make sure that I get all the competencies. But then, ironically enough, by doing that, they end up impacting trust and safety, presence, listening, awareness. Like all of those end up getting impacted because they're thinking about the markers. And I thought maybe we'll really quickly wrap this up by talking about the markers and the purpose of them, because they are not, we have the ICF core competencies, which are what guide us into knowing how to be a coach and how being a coach is exhibited in our interactions with our clients, right? I would love for you to share just for a moment about what the markers are, yeah, in relationship to those.
Yeah. I feel the markers, and I understand what you said, like, being marker centric and like constantly thinking about what to ask, and we've all been there. So it's not that we don't understand, but the thing about markers is that it's they're just providing us a structure around which your coaching conversation can be, like, structured. Because it is a conversation, but it is not an unstructured conversation, right? So to have the competency 3 in the beginning, so that your conversation has a direction in which it's flowing rather than going haywire here and there. And then, being present, listening actively, and cultivating trust and safety, all of those things, they come automatically. You do not have to have a marker constantly ticked to have those evidence, right? So if you are practicing listening, if you are creating that space for your client, just by having a competency 3 in the beginning to give the conversation a structure, and then competency 8, I love to say that it bookends the conversation beautifully by anchoring the learnings, by acknowledging the client, celebrating the progress, etc., and then partnering with the client to close the session so that they leave the session empowered. They know their next steps. They know what they need to do in case they face some barriers. So all of those things you prepared them for in between sessions as well. So this is just a beautiful container. That's what I would like to call the markers. They're just a beautiful container for us to, like, and then we need to, like, we don't I don't feel contained by the markers. I feel like I can be myself and explore things, and I can, like, just dance around in the moment with our clients rather than being worried about, oh, I ticked on this, I ticked this, I ticked this. And I don't think there's any coaching conversation, Tracy, where you can tick all the markers, like, and they'll all come naturally, unless and until you're deliberately asking those questions. So it's okay to let go of that need and just be there for your client.
Yeah, that was so beautiful. I just love the way that you explained the structure. And like as you were talking about it, you were also showing the flow that needs to happen in between, right? And that's, I don't think there's anything more to add to that other than the fact that the markers are also there as tools for us when we're mentoring and when we're evaluating to actually see how a competency has shown up in a conversation. They are absolutely not meant to be, and through those tools we can have conversations with the coaches around how the competencies may or may not have been observed. They're not meant to be converted into questions, and
Hmm.
they're not meant to necessarily even be followed in a specific order, which is something that we'll
Yes.
talk about in other sessions.
Absolutely.
Yay. Well, thank you so much for the conversation today. I have any excuse to get together and talk with you face to face is good for me. And then especially about this topic that we're both so passionate about. It's been wonderful.
It was a beautiful conversation, Tracy, and I think the passion was evident from both of us. So thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you soon again.
Yes.